patrons and subscribers and gifted first-timers. My name's Random Rob. Welcome to the new show. Today we're going to take a look at John Frankenheimer's super creepy 1966 sci-fi noir, Seconds. The story of an aging businessman who gets a second chance at youth and finds out that it has a nightmarish price. And I'm going to tell you 5 things you should know about this mid-60s suburban nightmare. Seconds is loosely considered the third of a trilogy of American paranoia films that Frankenheimer did in the 60s, including The Manchurian Candidate and 7 Days in May. While the earlier 2 films dealt with military themes, Seconds would take a cold, hard look at the suburban American businessman. The mid-60s was the era of the Madison Avenue type. In suburban New York, where I grew up, the mid-60s were the era of the bedroom community. Small country towns that suddenly found themselves filling up with businessmen and their families. Men who were at times strangers in the towns they lived in, getting on the trains early in the morning to go work in New York City, coming home at night on the trains to eat and sleep. And it's that rootlessness, that angst, that really drives Seconds. So here are my 5 things. Number 1, a failed classic. John Frankenheimer has said in interviews that Seconds may be the only film that went from failure to classic without ever having been a success. And this is in large part due to the unorthodox casting of Rock Hudson in the leading role. Hudson was a hot leading man. He was a big box office draw at the time. But as Frankenheimer would later point out, the people who were looking for a dark science fiction film in the mid-60s probably didn't want to see Rock Hudson in it. And the people who wanted to see Rock Hudson on screen didn't want to see him in a dark science fiction film. The film on its release did poorly in the States. It got an extremely hostile reaction at the Cannes Film Festival. So much so that Frankenheimer refused to go to a press Q&A and made Rock Hudson go instead, who was even less well prepared for the hostile European press. Unsuspecting audiences were probably not prepared for a film about a man getting a second chance at youth, having such a startling and horrifying ending scene. Number 2, Rock Hudson's best. In his career, Hudson invariably played macho male stereotypes. Seconds is the one film in his repertoire where he really got to do something different. Playing the role of Tony Wilson, an artist who's been given a false identity, a false life, finding himself in a community of strangers and having no idea how to fit in. And he manages to perfectly convey this essential quality of discontinuity. Rock Hudson was gay and spent most of his adult life in the closet. When I watch Seconds and his incredible performance in it, I can't help but feel that he was tapping into those feelings. That what he was presenting to most people in his life and to everyone on screen was a counterfeit. There's simply something genuinely edgy about his performance in Seconds that you do not see in any of his other films of the period. Another thing that's important is that the original concept for Seconds was that a male actor would play both parts of the aging businessman Arthur Hamilton and the reborn Tony Wilson. When Hudson was tapped for the part, he told Frankenheimer, "I can't play both parts. It's not going to be convincing. You have to get an older actor for Arthur Hamilton." Frankenheimer would ultimately choose veteran screen actor John Randolph, in itself a pretty cool gesture, as Randolph was an actor who had been blacklisted by the House Un-American Activities Committee and hadn't worked in over a decade. And the film would also star Jeff Corey, another actor who had been blacklisted by HUAC. But getting back to Hudson's idea of using 2 actors, in hindsight, Frankenheimer admitted it was a great decision and that the film definitely benefited from it. Number 3, James Wong Howe. Howe was a Chinese American who emigrated when his father came over to work on the railroads in the early 1900s. He had many odd jobs as a young man. He had developed an interest in photography at an early age, and as luck would have it, ended up getting a job as a screen clapper on a Cecil B. DeMille picture. And as the story goes, DeMille took a shine to him. Howe worked in the silence, he transitioned to color. In 1958, he won Best Cinematography for The Old Man and the Sea, and again for the Paul Newman film HUD. In seconds, Howe is really off the chain. This film has so many unusual shot choices and innovative filming techniques. Dutch angles, low angle shots, extreme close-ups, fisheye lenses, and in combination with some of the jarring, fast edits, Seconds creates a palpable, edgy, claustrophobic feeling from beginning to end. It's still a masterclass in creating visual tension. Number 4, Brian Wilson's Freakout. This doesn't really have anything to do with the film itself, but it's such a strange story I had to include it. 1966 was around the time people began to notice that the Beach Boys' Brian Wilson was having some issues. When the film premiered, Brian Wilson went to see it. He came in about 10 minutes late, and as he walked into the theater, one of the characters on screen was saying, "Come in, Mr. Wilson." And apparently due to this repetition of his name throughout, and the fact that much of the middle takes place on a beach, and that the film and its climax were so disturbing, Wilson thought that Phil Spector had put the film together to mess with him. It was shortly after he canceled the release of the Beach Boys album Smile, which wouldn't end up being released until decades later, and Wilson himself did not go to see a movie in a theater until E.T. came out, because he had been so disturbed by his experience watching Seconds. Number 5, the climax and the metaphor. Finding himself unable to adjust to his new life as a reborn, Tony Wilson returns to the mysterious company in Manhattan and asks to be reassigned. He's told repeatedly by the administrator, Mr. Ruby, that the only way he can do that is by finding someone else to come into the company. They persist, but he is unable to give them one name. Eventually, the old man, played by Will Geer, the head of the company, comes and has one last bedside chat with Tony, after which he's strapped to a gurney and wheeled into an operating theater to be euthanized and used as a cadaver as part of someone else's disappearance and rebirth. It's an extremely unsettling sequence, and it really slams home the idea of the futility of trying to start your life anew. The idea that if you weren't happy in the first place, what difference is a different identity going to make? The idea that to the company, you're really just a hunk of meat. And this is foreshadowed brilliantly in the early scene where Mr. Hamilton gets taken to the company by a meat truck. There's also the foreshadowing of the waiting room. When Mr. Hamilton first arrives, he walks into this room where he sees a bunch of businessmen all sitting around, quietly playing cards, doing crossword puzzles and watching TV, and nobody's talking to one another. And at the beginning, you don't know what this room is, and by the end, you realize the awful truth of it, that none of these men have been happy or able to adjust. So they're all there waiting to be reassigned, if they can find another person to bring in to take their place. It's a commentary on corporate headhunting too, and a pointed commentary about the emptiness of what was at the time the American dream. Seconds is a metaphor for retiring to the suburbs, and its message, I think, is still relevant. So what are some of your favorite dark 60s thrillers? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked what you heard, please press the like button and subscribe, and consider becoming a patron of the new show. I could use your help. Alright, this is Random Rob, signing off till next time. Be excellent, and take care. The new show is made possible by generous support from viewers like Tony, Luz, Arnell, Skipnick, Christopher, Marion, Eric, and B. Thank you so much for your support.